John had known for almost 40 years that his totem was the American bald eagle. Another name for the majestic bird is the white eagle. When John participated in healing, he became very high. That is why, after performing healing, he identified himself as White Eagle when he was asked, where under normal circumstances, he would have very likely had said no. John watched as a young man was riding his bicycle on the sidewalk in front of them. The young man waved at them as he rode by. He looked down as he neared the street corner. He hit the truck bringing in lumber to supply the lumberyard in preparation for all the new buildings about to happen. It would be learned later that Stephen Nation had just earned enough money to buy a new chain for his bicycle that day. His chain guide was not perfectly lined up, and the chain had come off, eliminating his ability to apply the brakes. John was out of his seat and out of the RV, running towards the 9-year-old boy faster than someone could count to 3. Dozens of the residents that were there welcoming the newcomers told John that this was the mayor's son. Jenny was on John's shoulder as he knelt next to the boy. The body had been mangled, and Seth Wilson, the local owner/reporter of the small area newspaper, was on the spot, camera in hand, taking pictures of the scene. The man had a minute-by-minute photographic history, including a picture of the truck. His photos included John and Jenny laying the boy flat on the ground, straightening his legs and arms. The two people were fixing the 2 broken legs, then the left arm. Then they went to the head, causing a jerk of the body. They went down the body, working towards the feet. Once they got there, John asked Jenny, "Can you stay there? I'm going to complete bringing him back, so ground him." John went to the boy's head with his hands hovering over it. The body moved and jerked, then seemed to relax. The boy's father had just arrived when Stephen opened his eyes. He looked to the sky and said, "White Eagle." John responded with yes. The father grabbed John. "What you are doing to my son?" Seth stepped in to stop his cousin, the mayor, from making a mistake. "John." Both the mayor and John Taylor answered, "Yes." "John, this man just brought your son back from the dead." "Be nice to him, cousin," Seth Wilson requested. "Who are you?" John Nation demanded. Johnny picked up the little boy. Jenny gave the boy a bottle of water that Teresa brought. John Nation looked at Seth and got a nod. He then looked to his son. "It will be the future that will recognize the White Eagle who will walk amongst us first." "Yep, this is him, Daddy." He pointed to John Taylor and said, "When I opened up my eyes, I saw him, and this is his son who was Geronimo returned, who fought for the nation long ago." "Drink, little eagle, so you can fly again," Jenny advised. John held out his right hand. "I'm John Taylor." Shaking hands, the newcomer said, "I'm John Nations, chief of the Okanogans and mayor of Omak. The people call me Black Horse." The parking lot was filling up. The 2 Johns watched as more RVs were coming to a stop. "Long ago, when I first learned to walk, I went outside, and 10 feet away were 2 cougars looking for a meal. A young stallion my father and uncle could not keep in the fence came to where I was and stood guard challenging the cougars. That is how my father and uncle found us. The 2 cougars, threatening the horse and the horse not backing down, pounding the ground with his front hooves. That Black Horse became my horse. The summer I graduated from high school, I was to go to WSU and play football on a full-ride scholarship. We think I came upon 2 rattlesnakes mating. They both struck Blackie, and I got thrown and broke my collarbone. Blackie killed the 2 snakes and then went for help. He traveled about a mile back home and then another mile back to where I was. He bowed, nudged me like he did every day of his life, and then he laid down and died." The mayor took a deep breath. "After that, I lost my scholarship. My uncle, the medicine man, went into a trance. He said I was needed here. Before the snows fell, my father had a stroke. I became his assistant and did everything he would normally do until he died 3 years later. 5 years ago, my uncle told the tribe I would unite all the people into one. I ran for mayor, and it was almost unanimous. A month ago, we asked my uncle to touch the spirit and bring the rains. He told us of his vision. The Okanogan tribe would see a great white buffalo born. There would be water gushing from the ground. The earth would eliminate much negativity, and a man known as White Eagle would be recognized by our future. He would lead the children of God to become one with our people. Within 5 days of seeing this White Eagle, He will eliminate the poachers from our lands. We were also told that you would unite us with God and that we would meet an expression of Mother Earth. John Nation looked in wonder as John, Jenny, and the others started laughing. That's all doable. John Taylor smiled. This morning at 4 a.m., I was told a white buffalo was born. I was on the way to see it when I got a call that our dry river had water in it and the dry lake is filling up. An artesian well was feeding it. A lot of water, cool, clean, sweet-tasting water. Then you show up and tell me I'm going to meet God and Mother Earth? John Nation looked at John Taylor in disbelief. Your uncle's vision was correct. John shared, all of it. Where are you going to end up? The mayor asked, still shaking his head. The old Ledgerwood place. John shared, I think. He handed the mayor a card with his phone number on it. Why there? John Nation gathered up his son in his arms. They were third or fourth cousins of mine. John smiled. My great-grandmother was a Rachel Murray Ledgerwood from Central Oregon. Central, like around the Staten area? John Nation asked. Just east of Salem? Yeah, John answered. My great-grandmother was her sister. John Nation shared. We're third cousins? Looks like it. Can I buy you a beer? John asked. No, my uncle died this morning. John Nation shared. I have some things to prepare. Sorry for your loss, John shared. He saw it coming. He was okay with it. John Nation started to leave, and he picked up his son. What do you want for dinner, little chief? Even though he already knew the answer. Pizza? Stephen asked. Everyone laughed. John turned to Johnny. That is your fourth cousin. The mayor? Johnny asked. No, Stephen. You are the mayor's third cousin, once removed. John was thirsty. Shall we get ourselves a beer? With everyone's agreement, they walked across the street to the tent. A woman was trailing behind. Many people knew her, and she greeted almost everyone as she followed behind. When John put in the order of 2 beers and 2 bottles of water, the woman standing behind said, Make that 3 beers, Harry. I'm paying. Okay, Margaret. Margaret put a $10 bill on the table. Hi, Margaret, John called out. John, I was dreaming of you last night. Margaret laughed. Was it a nice dream? John took a sip of beer. I dreamed you ran off with me and made me incredibly wealthy. Margaret gushed. John looked at Jenny and mouthed, I love you, then turned to Margaret. Are you sure it wasn't a nightmare? Oh no, I've already killed 3 husbands, so it could never be a nightmare. I'd train you free of charge. Just leave me all of your money. Margaret smiled. Margaret, I want to introduce my wife Jenny and my son Johnny and his wife Teresa. John was hoping for Margaret to come back to Earth. Oh, Margaret said like she had passed gas or something. The Taylors found a table and sat down. Margaret sat with them. Captain Frank came up to the table after buying a cold bottle of water. RVs are still being parked. We are also working on trucks, campers, and other cars, but they should go faster. Frank took a long sip. With Frank was a boy of about 15. Hi, Tony. Any sign of your mom and dad? Margaret asked. Tony looked sad and shook his head no. Tony's mom and dad were the bankers. His dad was the area manager, and his mom managed one of the small branches up the street. They would have arrived in Los Angeles about 4 hours before the San Andreas fault released. Margaret informed, I've tried all of the numbers and get no answers. No answering machines, nothing. Any luck with you, Tony? No, I'm pretty sure they're gone, Tony said sadly. Why is your face so bruised? Margaret asked. People don't like Mom and Dad much, Tony replied. You were watching when Jenny and I were working on Stephen. John shared. Yeah, pretty neat, Tony said. You need somewhere to live? Jenny asked. Mom and Dad didn't do nicely for people. They called the mayor Indian John. They used to have special dinners when they took someone's home. When they made someone homeless, they would laugh. The kids at school hated me because of Mom and Dad. I want to know what good parents look like. Tony was crying. They hated God. I hope they are gone. Mayor John said the earth was going to destroy many of the negative people. Have you eaten? Jenny got a shake of his head. When was the last time you ate? I don't remember, maybe yesterday. This was not planned. Mom and Dad leaving. They were going to leave me some money, but they forgot. Tony was crying again. Can you imagine having 7 kids and forgetting to feed them? Do you want to eat and then get your brothers and sisters? Or go get them first, then eat? Jenny asked. I would like to go get my brothers and sisters. They are hungry too, Tony asked. If you want, you can live with Jenny and me. John got another nod from Jenny. Jenny is my wife. Johnny is my son, and Teresa is his wife. Jenny and Teresa are going to have babies. You and your brothers and sisters will be part of our family. Oh, that would be wonderful, Tony's phone rang. Yes, I found food. Sally, it's going to be okay. Get your shoes on. Get Lucy's shoes on. I'm coming now. Tony hung up. That's my sister. I'll go get them. He got up, then stopped. I want you to run the bank. I know where the keys are. I want to see what nice people do for others. Tony, we will go with you. We need a walk. Teresa pulled up Johnny as she said this. The other tables were filling up. John and Jenny saw happy, smiling faces and waved to people they recognized. What do you think, Margaret and Frank? We could take over the bank and put everybody to work. It might help this community absorb 10,000 people. John was thinking out loud. Oh, we have more than that. I guess you don't know. Today is September 7th and they've been showing up since the 1st. We estimate 10,000 have already arrived. Then this morning, we had another 100 school buses with kids and maybe 100 teachers show up. There were at least 5,000 kids, and then you guys. We may have 25,000 to 30,000 people to figure out where to house. Margaret, you are going to get rich, Captain Frank teased. I don't care if I make a dime. We need to keep these people from freezing or starving to death this winter. After hearing that young man, his parents need to be spanked. Margaret growled. They have all of those kids in a 3-bedroom apartment. It seems criminal to me, and then to leave them in charge of a 15-year-old without food or money. How big is the Ledgerwood home? Jenny asked. Margaret thought. There are 4 houses on the property. The old house has been remodeled several times. I think there may be 8 or 9 bedrooms. 2 of the original children stayed on the property, and there are homes for them. Then there is a bunkhouse for workers that must hold 40. The newer houses have 4 to 6 bedrooms each. Tony had been selling the Taylors all the way back. He was carrying a little boy, maybe 3, on his shoulders. Johnny had a 4-year-old girl on his shoulders. There were twin 6-year-old girls, Terry and Fanny, a 10-year-old boy named Ben, and the oldest daughter, Sally, was 14. The 4-year-old girl appeared to be severely autistic. When they arrived, Jenny and Teresa went into action. Tony and Sally were right there helping. The little 4-year-old girl went over to John and just stood there. John motioned to pick her up, and she nodded, looking off into space. John lifted and sat her on his lap. He asked her higher soul if a healing could take place. He got a yes. He started running energy. The little girl flopped around, and then she closed her eyes and her whole body relaxed. Her features started changing. She looked more like her big sister Sally. John got the sense he was done. He looked up and saw the 2 very concerned faces of Tony and Sally watching. Her eyes opened and just looked at him. Are you my new daddy? If you want me to be, I will. I will love you and take care of you, okay? John asked. Okay, Lucy said. That would be nice. John noticed Sally being comforted by Jenny and Tony. Tony and Jenny both gave John a big smile. Tony mouthed, thank you. So John held onto Lucy and helped her eat a hot dog. Potty? Lucy announced. Sally moved into action and Tony grabbed Willie. The 2 older kids were very clearly used to taking care of the little ones. The bathroom in the RV had been made the official pit stop. When they came back, Tony had Lucy's hand, and they were running and laughing, just like children should. They watched and waited as Tony ate his 3rd hamburger. John smiled at his new son as he remembered coming home from Vietnam, and the first time he was at a restaurant, he too devoured 3 big hamburgers. These hamburgers tasted good. If all the red meat in Omak tasted that good, he just might include a bit more in his diet. Peter and Patty showed up, got to eat, and were invited along for the trip to the Ledgerwood homestead. As they began down the driveway, Patty yelled, "Stop!" John stopped the RV at the foot of the driveway. Yes, Patty? John was looking in the mirror at her. Who owns that cute little house across the street? Patty asked. Margaret nodded her head. We do, or rather, I do. You want it, Patty? John asked. Yes, I do. I have been seeing that for a while now in my dreams, Patty said. It's yours, Patty. You want to look at it now, or wait until we are on the way out? Can we look now? Patty asked tentatively. That's what we are going to do. John turned the big rig off. Margaret, why are there thousands of buffalo everywhere? Margaret answered as she dug for the keys to both houses. I'm glad you and Chief John are related to each other. Did you know those burgers were made with buffalo meat? Everything you ate today was donated to the People's Trust. All the money we paid will go towards feeding the homeless this winter. John, we need that bank opened again. Found them. Patty, come get your keys. Margaret handed Jenny 4 sets and Patty 1 set. Everyone exited the RV. They got to the center of the road and John stopped. The people own the buffalo. Margaret shared. Margaret, why aren't there any vehicles driving around town? John asked. We don't know when any fuel will be delivered again. It always came out of Seattle. No one is driving unless they must. We haven't found a new source yet, Margaret said with a lot of concern. Is somebody putting in sidewalks? John asked. He was looking at the area on the north side of the road. It had been graded with sand and was level with the road. We applied for a $20 million grant from the state in 2007, just before the housing collapse. We got notice of the approval of it in 2008, just before the thing on Wall Street. We were going to add $2 million to the project. So we spent our $2 million on being able to make the concrete ourselves. We were set to go. We even purchased 8 used concrete trucks. Then we get a notice that the state was no longer able to fulfill the grant. Margaret shared with everybody. During her story, Peter and Patty had moved to the house in their excitement. What are you thinking, John? Jenny asked. Tony was right there holding Willie. The first time I heard that, I knew we would be doing sidewalks. If we had sidewalks, it would be a safer place for our children to ride their bicycles. Secondly, it will help kickstart this economy. We will need 400 to 500 workers for labor. They'll buy groceries and work clothes, beer at the tavern, and vitamins at the pharmacy. Because the government isn't there to pay tax to, all that money will stay here in town. That money will help get this economy going. Tony was smiling and Willie was laughing. I think we should do it, Dad. Tony said with certainty, then frowned. Do we have the money? Son, did you notice the floor in the back bedroom was raised about 2 inches? The reason is there is about $40 million under the bed in gold. It weighs a ton, and that is what I paid for it. Margaret gasped. It's going to be a lot of fun being in this family, Dad. Tony laughed as John took Willie and put him on his shoulders. Johnny had perched Lucy the same way. Margaret approached John and Tony. Tony, can you get us into the bank? That gold should be someplace safe. Yes, why? Tony was still smiling. Tony, Margaret thinks there's a safer place than being next to Dad. Johnny laughed. On the way here, our dad took out 2 attack helicopters. They tried to kill all of us. Now they're junk. Margaret looked at Johnny in absolute shock. They made their way to the front door of Peter and Patty's new home. John asked as he looked at the front yard, Margaret, who mowed the lawn? John Nation started the People's Trust about 10 years ago. When he became mayor, people come into the office looking for food. He has them work. When they finish the work, he gets them food for their family for a day. If they come back the next day, they work and they eat. When John ran for his 2nd term last year, everybody voted for him. This could be a dead town. He kept it alive. Now you, John Taylor, are the frosting on the cake. Margaret smiled. The People's Trust mowed the lawns in the preparation for all of you coming to town, John. They toured the 4-bedroom house. It was old, but it had been maintained. It sat on 10 acres, and it had a well that was now at a much higher level. The water table in the whole area had risen 100 feet. The kitchen had been remodeled in the last 10 years, bathroom too. There was gas heat throughout the house, and where the old wood stove had been, there was a modern high-efficiency wood stove as well. The furniture was all there. All they needed bedding. When he saw the barn, Peter wondered if he could put in a garden or raise some of those buffalo. Margaret, where did the owners of this property go? Peter asked. They got old. First, George died, and a few years later we moved his wife Margaret into the Mountain View nursing home. They are both buried near the Ledger Woods in the Okanogan City Cemetery. Margaret shared. I want to go and leave flowers on their grave, Patty said. I'll go with you, Patty, Jenny shared. Let's go see your house. Did you ever think you would have 7 kids, sister? Patty asked as they moved towards the door. Sis, it scares the daylights out of me, but I've got John. Jenny and Patty laughed. They seem to be really good kids. Margaret, do people lock their doors around here? Henry Frank asked. Only if they leave town for more than a few days. Margaret thought, the only crime we have is the mercenaries up on the reservation poaching our buffalo. I promised John Nation we would take care of that little problem, John said. Sounds like the sooner the better, Beth added. Let's see the other 2 houses that will be Johnny's and Teresa's and Henry's and Beth's. John was looking up as he talked to Jenny. Some of us need a nap. Willie was holding onto John's head and had his head laid on top of John's asleep. Margaret, Jenny whispered and pointed at Willie. There is a big lazy boy in the family room of the big house, Margaret whispered back. She pointed out which keys Jenny had for the big house. Margaret motioned she was going to take the other keys and open the other 2 houses. Jenny led John, with a sleeping Willie, to the front door. They quietly made their way through to the family room. There was a monster chair with a blanket folded up on the seat. Jenny helped John remove Willie from his head, and John sat back with his feet up. Jenny laid Willie back onto John's left side, and the little boy patted John's tummy and eased back to sleep. Jenny heard a noise, and there was Lucy. Do you want to take a nap with Daddy and Willie? Lucy nodded. Jenny helped her up onto John's right side. She reached over and touched Willie's hand. Jenny eased the blanket over the 3. Then she bent down and kissed John. You comfy? Yeah, love you. John smiled. I'll slow the group down. Give you an hour or more satires. Jenny wanted to know. John nodded and closed his eyes. A little later, John felt someone looking at him. He eased his eyes open, and Tony and Sally were standing over him and smiling. Both said, "Thank you." John smiled back at them and eased back to sleep. The next thing he knew was Willie climbing up and kissing him on the cheek. "Potty?" Willie asked. Even though it had been over 30 years, John instantly remembered Potty and 3-year-olds. "Yes, I will help." They disengaged from Lucy, and in the process, she also woke up. They could hear voices in the kitchen as they found the bathroom. Both Willie and Lucy had shorts on and needed help sitting on the toilet. Willie was done first and jumped down and ran out of the room. Lucy was next, and John helped steady her as she went. That is how Jenny found him, a daddy helping his daughter. She finished up and John flushed and put the toilet seat down so Lucy could wash her hands while standing on the toilet seat. John made a game out of it as he sang Old MacDonald Had a Farm, E-I-E-I-Oo. Lucy and Jenny were laughing so hard that Willie came back to see what in the world was going on. Willie got his turn washing his hands. Finally, John closed the door and said, "My turn to go." Both kids wanted to help, and John looked at Jenny for help. "Come on, kids, we are discussing who gets which bedroom. You 2 get to help decide." Jenny announced. She then looked at John. "You get to sleep with me." "Oh, good," John smiled. When John came out, he was told there was going to be a spaghetti feed at the People's Trust tent. "Buy you dinner, Margaret?" John asked. "That would be nice." Margaret smiled. Everyone climbed into the bus. On the way, Tony asked a question. "Dad, is this a gold bar?" "Yes, that is one of 200 bars that are on this bus. Each one is worth about $1 million over in Spokane. I paid less than 200 grand for each one in Seattle before the earth changes." "John, is it okay to share?" Peter asked. "Yeah, everyone here is considered a family." John smiled. "You have $200 million on this bus." Margaret was a little bit concerned. "Yes, 200 million on this bus, Margaret, but we have purchased very close to 600 million in gold, silver, and coins. It now has a value in Spokane of over $4 billion, Peter shared. "What are you going to do with it all?" Margaret demanded. "Start the economy," John added as they pulled up to a very busy People's Trust tent. "If we can get everyone to drop a 0 off the current prices, then we will have something like 40 billion in value." As everyone was vacating the bus, Tony came up to John. "When do you want to go to the bank, Dad? Are you hungry?" John asked. Yeah, starving, Tony answered. Then we will go to the bank after we eat. John laughed. Okay, Dad, Tony answered. John was sipping on a beer after finishing off a large plate of pasta that had big chunks of ground buffalo throughout the sauce. John looked up and saw a familiar-looking group. Thank God their home had been far below the surface of the waters that covered Auburn, Washington. John stood and made his way to where the familiar people were asking if there was any way to find someone from the Seattle area. When John got close, he said, I might be able to help you. There were two screams, one from John's sister Sherry and one from his favorite niece. In a second, John had his arms full of females. His brother-in-law shook his hand. Please forgive us? Samuel asked. John shook his head. Nothing to forgive. I was having trouble myself believing that it would happen. John, we don't think Chuck made it. Sherry shared about their older brother that lived down near Longview on the Columbia River. Don't give up hope, sis. Up to about a minute ago, I didn't think you guys made it, John shared. Hungry? When he got nods all around. This stuff is really good. The sauce has buffalo meat in it. Tony, got a minute? John had seen Tony going after a second helping. Tony, this is my sister, her husband, and my favorite niece. Family, this is my new son. He brings with him 6 brothers and sisters, and I am most pleased. Tony, go grab your seconds. They have to eat too. Glad to meet you. We will talk later, Tony said as he moved to the seconds line. Where is Eric? John asked. He and his girlfriend Tammy are taking care of the dogs. Sherry smiled. You have money? John asked. We bought gold, Sherry stated. How much? John asked. We've been buying it for a while now. I believe we have 50 gold eagles. Sherry shared. You're set then. After you eat, we are going to visit our new bank, then to our new home. When you get your food, come sit with us. John smiled. We will find you a place to stay during the next day or 3. See Johnny and his wife Teresa over there? Sherry laughed as she waved to Johnny. John looked at his phone and saw that it was 7:00 p.m. He heard the last call and he looked at Tony. He was still eating his second plate of spaghetti and had a big smile on his face. He caught John's eye and leaned back and patted his tummy. Margaret was saying the Okanagan area was going to be allocated 50,000 salmon this season. Perhaps 1 million fish were amassing at Grand Coulee, and it was expected that over 100,000 fish will be coming up the Okanagan River within the next 2 or 3 weeks. The tribe had not been able to catch any amount of salmon in 30 years. They were excited because now they could teach young men how to smoke salmon. That number of fish would be able to provide hundreds of thousands of meals for everyone in the area. Margaret, can I learn to smoke salmon? Tony asked. Ask your new dad, Margaret smiled. We will talk to people. My guess is you will be very welcome. John looked at Jenny and got a smile. It will be a lot of hard work, but your participation will bring much respect within this community. I want that, Dad, Tony said sternly. What about school? Samuel and Sherry and their family had found places to sit at the table. John was holding on to Willie and Jenny had Lucy. The other kids were up helping the staff clean up the tables. After introductions and welcomes, the eating continued, and the talk went back to the coming fish. The high school will probably be closed during the fish run. Margaret answered, Don't know about the junior high. I would imagine the priority goes to getting meals for the community, John shared. Fish run, Samuel and Eric both asked. We are expecting over 100,000 catchable salmon to show up in our river soon, John shared. Is there a limit? Samuel asked. Yes, well, maybe 1 or 2 per day per person. It is expected that these fish will be 10 to 50 pounds, Margaret declared. How many days are they expected to run? Eric asked. 10 to 14 days. A man at the next table answered, You're White Eagle? Yes, I am, John replied. Your family can bring their fish to our racks and smoke them. No charge. Thank you, John nodded. I understand we may be working on sidewalks soon? The man asked. I will be proposing to the county council tomorrow night to fund a $20 million budget towards the sidewalks. The idea is to get our good people back to work. John looked to the man. What is your name? I'm Billy Nation. You met my brother. You saved my nephew and you sit with an honored member of our family. I also see young Tony. The spirit says he will become a leader in this community. Let him learn the Indian ways about fishing. Yes. Let us walk the earth together. During the days of the white buffalo, the earth will blossom again. Work will be plentiful, the salmon will run in the river, the game will flourish in the mountains. This will be the beginning of many good years. You, Billy Nation, will live a very long time and you will not see a bad year again. John promised. Thank you, White Eagle, Billy Nation said. Thank you, Billy, Margaret affirmed. My brother is a fool. May the White Eagle heal the ignorance my brother carries. Billy Nation shared, let him see the truth of all things through your eyes, White Eagle. End this nonsense. John turned to Margaret. You are John Nation's wife, and you are Stephen's mother. John got a nodding head. He looked to Billy. I will ask the spirits of the universe to help solve this. Margaret nodded and burst into tears. Jenny was sitting next to her and wrapped her up in a loving hug. Margaret was almost twice Jenny's age, but was not much bigger. After a few minutes, John asked softly, Margaret, are you okay? Yeah. Margaret took a deep breath and wiped her eyes. Sorry about that. When Stephen was a baby, John was driving by and saw me hug William the day that William announced he was retiring and moving to Arizona and giving me his agency. John could not believe that William would do that unless we were having an affair. John has been the only man in my life. Our baby, Stephen, was only 3 months old, and John ordered me out. He said if I ever came back, he would shoot me. He was also angry because I put my license in my maiden name. He forbids me the use of his name even though we are still married. But to him, I'm dead. There is even a cross in the family plot with my name on it. Jenny looked to John until their eyes met, and John nodded. John turned to Tony to see if he was done. Tony was frozen as he looked to Margaret. You are a queen, like Mama Jenny. Tony looked to John. We have to fix this. Margaret, can you give us a day? John looked around at his family. Oh my God, if you can heal this. Margaret left the rest of her sentence unsaid, afraid to hope. Shall we go see what the bank looks like? John asked Margaret and the family as he looked at Tony. Tony quickly ate the last bite of spaghetti on his plate and took his trash to the 3 refuse containers. One was marked food, another paper, and the third plastics. John was behind Tony, and Tony explained, the food scraps go to pig farmers, the paper is burned in the community steam-driven generator that supplies electricity for over 1,000 homes, and the plastics are cleaned and sanitized and used again. That's why the plastics are heavy-duty. Makes sense, John thought aloud. A group of kids in the high school figured this out. Tony shared, it has saved the community millions on the trash and electricity. Those with John climbed aboard the RV, and Samuel and Sherry followed with their bunch in their 5th wheel. They only went a few blocks and pulled up in front of the National Bank building. There was plenty of room in the parking lot. The building was 2 stories high, and when John brought the RV to a stop, Tony and his brothers and sisters all piled out, immediately heading up the back stairs. Lucy came over to John and with tears in her eyes, gestured that she wanted up. She hung onto John and kept saying over and over, No, 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 go home with you, please. Lucy, you're not going to stay here. You live with Jenny and me now. We just stopped so you can get your stuff, okay? John tried to reassure the little girl. Okay, Daddy, promise, Lucy said. We promise, Lucy, I'll go with you. Jenny informed, do you have a teddy bear? Okay, Mommy, yeah. Lucy held out her hands for Jenny and they disappeared around to the back of the bank in the direction the others had gone. John kept looking at the building. It looked sound. It had bricks 8 feet high all the way around. John guessed it had been here for 30 years or more. Tony came running down with a handful of keys. When Tony held up a key, John pointed to the door and nodded. The first thing John noticed was that there was no drive-through banking teller. Everyone followed John and Tony through the door. John took a delivery notice off the door. He glanced at it and wondered what could be coming to a bank that would be in almost 200 boxes. John noticed the small lobby. Tony pointed out the little vault where the safety deposit boxes were held off to the right and waited by the big vault. John looked at this door and wondered if it was real. He had seen one in Seattle where it was all for show, and behind it inside the vault, another safe was where they locked up the money. Daddy, put 2 fingers from your left hand on the 1 and the 7. Oops, I forgot. I gotta put the key in first. Tony put a key into a lock on the right side of the door. He turned it. Okay, Daddy, Push the 1 and 7 and then touch the 6 with your right hand. John followed Tony's instructions, and nothing happened. Tony repeated his instructions, saying, "You have to keep the pressure on the 1 and 7 when you push the 6. John did, and everything started moving. The wheel turned, and the big bars that sealed the door retracted. "Does the combination work?" John asked. "Yeah, but I don't know it." Tony said, "Could it just be you and me?" "Family, give Tony and me a few minutes to make sure there are no dead bodies in here," John announced. Everyone laughed. The front room held cash drawers and locked file cabinets with deeds written on the outside of them. The first thing John thought was this room looked smaller inside than it did from the outside. "Dad, see this button?" Tony pointed to what looked like a doorbell back above the entrance. "Watch the back wall." Tony pushed it, and part of the back wall moved. "Wow, that is one of the best ones I have ever seen," John exclaimed as he watched the concealed door open. Tony led the way into the back room. Off to the right, there were 10 boxes. A sealed envelope was on top of the boxes. Tony ripped the drawstring and took out the packing list and 10 keys marked from 1 to 10 that were taped on another piece of cardboard. Tony handed the packing list to John as he found the number on the first metal box and pulled the key off the cardboard. "Wow," Tony shouted. About that time, Jenny stuck her head in the door. "Is this a boys-only room, or can 2 ladies join you?" Jenny was still holding onto Lucy. "Come in, Mom. I knew these boxes had come in the day my other mom and dad left. I knew they were used to transport money. Look at this." Tony lifted the lid and finished removing the packing material. There were many stacks of $100 bills. "I wonder how much there is," Jenny asked. "It looks like each box has 102,400 individual bills." John read off the packing list. "Do you mean $102,400? Jenny asked. "No, that box has $10,040,000 in it, and there are 10 boxes. John smiled. "Honey, I told Tony this bank belongs to him and his siblings." Jenny frowned and looked at John. "Jenny, we currently have a net worth of over $4 billion. Jenny's frown turned to a smile. "Gold in Spokane hit over 8 grand an ounce this morning, and we have 20 tons. So you're saying we are comfortable without this?" Jenny's smile grew as John nodded. "So when I buy something, I don't need to look at the price?" John shook his head. "John, I thought you were getting the better part of this relationship. This is a fantasy." "Holy cow!" Jenny laughed as she came over to John, giving him a hip bump and a kiss. Her arms were still full of tired Lucy with a stuffed teddy bear. "I like you guys. You're fun. Thank you for being our mom and dad." Tony grinned. "Daddy, what's in the other boxes?" "Looks like 50s, 20s, 10s, 5s, 2s, and 1s. According to the manifest, the total looks like $287,044,000. John answered his son in his most efficient accounting voice. "That includes the $100 bills here. Daddy, I want you to use this as we need it." Tony replied, "All that I ask is if any of my brothers and sisters want to go to college, we can. If there are still colleges around." John was looking at Jenny. "What if we set up a trust fund for each of our children of, say, 10 million? 70 million, Tony figured aloud. "You better think 80 million you're about to have a little brother." Jenny patted her tummy. "And we better not forget Gaia." John laughed. "Or Matt. Tony, how do you want to handle this, sis?" John asked, "With the rest of the family. Can we keep it a secret?" Tony asked. John nodded as he said, "We can try." "What are you thinking, Dad?" Tony asked. "Son, we're moving into a time when more and more people can read minds." John shared, "One day there will be no secrets." "Then let's tell the family and our friends," Tony stated. "Shall we invite them in?" John asked. Tony invited everyone into the vault. He took Willie into his arms and asked his brothers and sisters to follow him. Sally took Lucy, and the 7 children stood before the 10 boxes. Johnny and Teresa followed the children in, and he once again took Willie into his arms, setting him on his shoulders. "Brothers and sisters," our other dad ordered a lot of money. Tony looked around and realized he was talking to everyone. Samuel and Sherry, along with Eric, Tammy, and April, had also come in. Peter and Patty had just followed everyone else. When he found John, he mouthed, "How much?" "Almost $288 million, John supplied. Tony lifted the lid and carefully picked up a $100 bill. "We have thousands of these. I have given it all to Papa John and Mama Jenny. They are going to set up trusts. So when we get old enough, we will get some money, enough to become teachers, doctors, and engineers. If we want, we will have money to start businesses. Is this okay with you?" "I want to play baseball, Tony," Ben said. Ben's response took Tony by surprise, and he had to shake the cobwebs from his brain for a second. "Who wants to play baseball?" Tony looked around the room and saw everyone with their hand raised. "Dad, we're going to need a lot of mitts." "Ben, we'll start playing catch and throwing the ball." Tony smiled. "It looks like you are going to have a lot of partners to play catch with." "We'll find out what's available in this town." John laughed. Willie was still sitting on Johnny's shoulders. Willie looked like he was in deep thought as to what ball was. John finally tickled Willie and got him laughing. "Shall we bring the gold in?" He loved having a 3-year-old in his life again. Everyone seemed to move as they exited the back room of the vault. Peter had been part of the team that had put the gold and silver in the RVs. Johnny and Henry Frank lifted the bed so the right side of the bedroom's floor was accessible. Peter removed the plywood, and there were half of the gold bricks visible. Peter found the carrier boxes that had been made in one of the closets. Each caddy was made to carry up to 12 bricks. Peter put 6 in the first caddy, and Tony headed off. When Willie picked up a brick, everyone stopped for a moment and watched the little boy giving it his all. Samuel grabbed 2 caddies, and the first round had 60 bricks in the vault. Eric helped move the bed, and the rest of the gold bars came into view. The second cycle moved 70 bars into the vault. The mood was joyous, with everyone laughing as they carried the ton of gold into the vault. As the last bar was placed, it was apparent that 1 bar was missing. Jenny looked around and then called, "Willie? Willie!" There was some noise in the bank's reception area. Then everyone heard a small voice singing, "Hi ho, off work go. Hi ho." And then there he was with the last bar of gold. John went to one knee and held out his hands for the last bar. Everybody yelled and cheered as John turned and finished the pile of 200 bars. "I understand there's more of this," Samuel asked. "Yes, and I also have 50 tons of silver." John shared. "It won't be enough, but it will be a beginning to get the world working again. If we don't become productive soon, we are going to lose half or more of the population." "What happens tomorrow?" Sherry asked. "We get served breakfast at 6 a.m., and then we hope to get every one of the 400 RVs emptied and set up for people to live in." "Our workday starts at 7 a.m., John announced. Tony was showing John the locking sequence and where the switches for the lights were. Tony checked the back door, then the two of them locked the front door. Samuel rolled a cigarette and was next to the front door smoking. Just as John and Tony finished up, Samuel whispered, "Don't look. I think we have a spotter and a sniper across the street watching us." "Jenny, take the family to God. I'm taking Tony and Samuel to the sun. We have 2 poachers across the street that will be going with us," John whispered as he visualized his wife's face. He heard back, 10-4, "Love you." John reached out with his hands to Tony and Samuel. "Take my hands." A few seconds later, Samuel exclaimed, "Holy shit, what is that?" "That is the sun. Watch." John looked at the faces of Tony and Samuel as the 2 men dropped their weapons and binoculars. The railing opened in front of them and they moved towards the sun. When the 2 men exploded and disappeared in a burst of flames, both Tony and Samuel had questions. "Did Mom and Dad come here?" Tony asked. "Those 2 men, who judged them?" Samuel demanded. John ignored his brother-in-law and looked to Tony. "No, they are going to another 3rd-dimensional planet." John shared, "You are more evolved than they are." John then turned to his angry brother-in-law. The railing before Samuel was opening 3 to 6, then closing, then opening again. John put his hand on Samuel's shoulder, and the railing became solid in front of Samuel. Their souls judged them and removed them from the soul tree. Neither God nor I judged them. "You brought them here." Samuel questioned who judged. "You have to be responsible." "Samuel, we've brought hundreds of people here, and the railing did not open up. We've taken them back to Earth to live out their days. We do not force anyone through that railing. "This is not our place," John said calmly. His railing was trying to open. Tony shared, "He is on the borderline." John turned to Tony to answer his question. "Can we leave? I want to make sure Mommy Jenny and my brothers and sisters are all right." His soul is still trying to decide, John shared. Then finally John reached out and took Tony's hand. He was still holding on to Samuel. In an instant, they were in a special place. "Now where are we? Is this the moon?" Samuel asked. "This is our Father God. This is where we all came from in the beginning," John shared. Sally, followed by all but Willie, came running up to Tony, wanting to know if he was all right. "Yes," was all he got out before they all started dragging him towards the Christports. Off to the right was a couple walking up to the group. They looked at each other, and the man made up his mind. Tony, Sally, Ben, Fanny, Terry, Lucy, and Willie. The man called to his children, sounding very sad. Tony turned, and when he saw his real parents, it took a moment to realize that John had been telling the truth. They were going to another third-dimensional planet. They were not going to graduate. They had failed or flunked or just not grown enough. Tony remembered riding in a taxi in LA last year. The driver went on and on about how good Tony and the kids were. He also complained about the kids in his neighborhood. When the ride was over, he thanked the man, but hoped he never had to ride with the man again. As he looked at his parents, he realized he felt the same as he did with the taxi man. He hoped he never had to be their son again. Then he wondered if maybe he had tried to make a difference for them, if maybe the result would be different now. Tony hugged his dad and then his mom. Sally and the kids were right behind him. When Lucy hugged their mom, she started talking. "I'm sorry, Mommy and Daddy, that you are going somewhere far away. We will miss you and will think happy thoughts about you." Their real parents were stunned. "I'm so happy for you, darling. We love you all," their mother shared. "Mommy, puppy soon." Willie was all excited about a puppy. He kissed his dad and then his mother with his patented slobbery kisses. "Love you, Willie." They whispered to Willie's back as he ran as fast as he could into the arms of Jenny. Their parents threw them all kisses and waved goodbye, turned, and were gone. Samuel was in John's face. What happened to them? "We believe they landed in LA, just before the San Andreas Fault slipped into the Pacific." John answered, "Ask God. Our Father will tell you." "I don't trust this," Samuel whispered. "Then I can't help you because this is my source for everything I know." John looked toward God, and there was his sister standing there. Sherry came over and grabbed her husband's hand. "Come with me." Her tone did not leave any room for choice. Samuel looked like he was being dragged to the slaughter. Tony turned and hugged John with all his might. "You are now truly my son, and I am your father. I thank your parents for bringing all of you into my life. Tony, you will grow to become a great man. I am already very proud of you. It is all right to be confused and full of conflicting emotions. Let it out." John was still holding Lucy. The last time Tony was measured, he was a little over 5 feet tall, and Jenny moved so she sheltered him. Willie and Lucy were rubbing Tony's head. The other kids moved so they could touch Tony. Tony had been packing the load for a long time. It's hard to be 16 and forced to act like a parent for 6 others. Jenny smiled as she witnessed the stream of tears coming out of John's eyes as the pain of a lost childhood was transferred from the child to the new father. Jenny knew she would cuddle with this man forever, but tonight would be a bit more important. After a few minutes, 4 children came out of nowhere and started talking to the family. Willie and Lucy both got down. One of the new boys, Matt, was hugging Johnny and Teresa. A little girl was there getting her share of hugs. Lucy and the redhead were talking. Bert was sitting with Willie in his lap and talking about a puppy. "Who are they, Dad?" Tony asked. "That little boy Willie is sitting on his Bert. He's going to be your little brother in just a few months. That other little boy hugging Johnny and Teresa is their son, Matt. He is going to be born the same day as Bert. That little girl with the red hair is Gaia, your future sister. She's an expression of Mother Earth. She begins the 1,000 years of peace." John was still hugging his new son. "That other little girl is Maria McCormick. She becomes everyone's presidential assistant when she grows up. She helps us to run our world. Let me tell the kids. Tony shared his desire. John stood there watching as Tony spread the word. Soon the kids formed a circle with all of them talking at once. A lot of laughter was coming from the circle. John's nephew, his girlfriend, and his sister approached him. Eric was between the two girls and holding onto both of their hands. "Hi, Uncle John," Eric announced. "Hi, Eric. Hi, girls. How's my favorite niece?" John kept glancing towards the circle of kids. "Uncle, I love your new wife. She says you need an assistant. Can I apply for the job?" April asked. "Meet me at the bank at 8 a.m., John advised. "Can you give me a ride?" April asked with a smile. "Pick you up at 6 a.m.? John smiled back. "I'll buy you steak and eggs." "Can we come too?" Eric asked. "Yes," John answered. "We want you to marry us?" Eric asked, speaking quickly and running his words together. "I'm sure Jenny might object to that. I have to marry her first." John signaled to Jenny, hoping she would join them. "No, Tammy and I want to get married, and we want you to perform the marriage, Uncle John," Eric stated. John put his arm around Jenny and looked to April. "And you are being left out?" April faked a hit to John's stomach, and he reached out and pulled her in. "I would be proud to perform your marriage." John's sister Sherry joined them. "Eric, did you ask him?" "Yes, and he said yes for he and Eric reported. "Tammy, we have some work to do to get ready for this wedding," Sherry advised. "Sis, you can't get any readier than being here." "Ah, John, you're forgetting things like a wedding dress?" Sherry smirked. "Remember that yellow sweatshirt with the red Marine Corps emblem on it?" John's sister nodded. John was talking about the yellow sweatshirt he got in San Diego in 1967. When he came home on leave, he gave it to his 8-year-old sister and she wore it everywhere. "Go place your hand on God and ask for an extra-large version, one with a hood on it." Everyone watched as in a blink of an eye the yellow hoodie sweatshirt appeared around Sherry. Sherry doubled time getting back to the group and gave John a big hug. "This is so neat and warm." "Tammy, can you visualize what you want for a wedding dress?" John asked as he was holding his sister. He then looked at Jenny until their eyes met. "Yes, I have a picture," Tammy said, then smiled big as she realized that, even with the world upside down, her wish was going to be granted. "We need to get our babies home." Jenny smiled, looking at John. "How is Samuel?" John asked Sherry. "He's in your Christport crying. It's like he has dozens of lifetimes full of frustration and anger." Sherry whispered just loud enough for John and Jenny to hear. "He does. Imagine being the last Tsar of Russia, believing in the League of Nations, and sending his nation's gold to New York to support it. You were his wife and I was his son. The banksters stole the gold and had the Tsar and his family killed. And that was just one life. Samuel has been working for mankind since the beginning of time. He's pretty beat up." John shared, "He doesn't trust anymore. He was the Roman soldier that took pity on Jesus and stabbed him in the gut. He has guilt about that too." "Can we stay here all night?" Sherry asked. "The kids want to help at the bank. We have almost 70 tons of gold and silver to unload." John shared, "I'll come to get you at 6 a.m. "Sounds great. Love you, big brother." Sherry took a deep breath and squared her shoulders and walked over to where her husband Samuel was still sitting in the Christports. Everybody hugged and kissed Bert, Matthew, Maria, and Gaia. They stepped apart and John took them back to the bank parking lot. They looked around and saw and felt no additional dangers. They loaded up and the 3 miles to their home was just enough for all the kids, but Tony and Sally to fall asleep. "Let's take them to bed." They each grabbed a kid and in no time had them in bed. Tony had Willie and laid him down in his bed with him, he explained. "Willie is going to wake up and he won't know where he is. We will be fine. I'll take care of him." "Son, is it okay if April uses your bed tonight?" John asked. "Yeah, Dad," Tony answered as his head hit the pillow. His eyes closed and he appeared to be asleep. After the house became quiet and all were asleep in their new beds. As John lay dreaming, he found himself seated in a circle. It was the usual bunch: Jesus, Moses, Buddha, Mohammed, Confucius, and Melchizedek. There were many more circles of seated individuals, both men and women. John did not know who many of them were. There were hundreds. John, we congratulate you on making a difference. We need to have you become more public to take on a leadership role. Moses shared, "This body is 69 hard years old. I have been shy all my life and find it very difficult to be in public." John shook his head. "Your immortality gene has been turned on. Exercise, your body will become younger." Melchizedek requested, "We need you to do this. Dear brother, do this for your newfound family." Jesus shared, "There are other aspects of your soul on earth. If you agree to do this, your other aspects will ascend and focus on you, making you very powerful." Jesus shared, "I don't want to go down that road. Power corrupts, and absolute power always corrupts absolutely." John looked down with tears in his eyes. "That is why you are who you are. John, we all investigated the future and realized you were the only one that could step up above the corruption. Even the resistance of this role is a good thing. It confirms where your heart is for mankind," Buddha acknowledged. "It will be hard. Please love my followers. Many have been misled and will need to be trimmed from their soul." Muhammad shared, "My followers will stand up and embrace you. Once you touch China, this will flow like a hurricane across the land and into India." Confucius confirmed, "Into all of the eastern lands." Buddha agreed, "Okay, I'm willing to do anything to bring peace for 1,000 years to Earth." John woke up. His body was drenched in sweat. "Okay." And with that, John turned over with tears in his eyes and cuddled with Jenny and went back to sleep.